To date, the most viewed video on this channel is the Avoid My Operations Level 1 through 30 Mistakes video that we posted back in September of 2021. Now that we're 9 months further down the road in Operations Level 41, we'll try to add to that video and reflect back on our biggest lessons, many of which we learned the hard way, on the road from Operations Level 31 through 40, in the hopes that once again we can provide some insight and guidance to players either in that stage of the game or about to go through it. Let's do it. A few real quick housekeeping notes before we really dive in. You can quickly navigate through this video with the chapters that are marked, so you can easily bookmark certain sections of it or share it with your alliance mates, friends, what have you, a little bit easier. We'll focus on the things that we consider to be mistakes, missteps, or things that otherwise negatively impacted our progression or enjoyment in this video. In the future, we may release a complement to this video where we discuss the things that really set us up for success in this range and beyond. Lastly, and applicable not only to this video, but every video you find on this channel. If there's ever conflict between what Dan recommends and your enjoyment of the game, Dan is wrong every time. So we'll dive into it in no particular order. A little outside of this level range, but I truly did feel it here. So first on my list was not building a USS Saladin. The Bortus was a trusty companion of mine for a long while. I was primarily a grinder at this stage in the game, so it did make sense to me to build a battleship. So I don't necessarily regret building that Bortus, since it does still serve me well on occasion. But my thought at the time was that I should push all of my crystal into that Vidar and get it built up to maximum, complete with those max charged nano probe chests every single day, and I really just burnt myself out in Borg space to do it. Hated logging into the game for a while as a result. Worse still, the Vidar does not hold a candle to the Saladin in PvP. The Bortus really had trouble chasing down players even if it could beat them, which is just par for the course for a battleship, unless they were just completely distracted for some reason or somebody else pinned them down so that I could catch up to them. To add insult to injury, Scopely has released ROM into the game now, which makes that big round 1 damage of the Saladin's high impact torpedo the de facto base cracking crew combination for quite a long while in the game. It's a lot of the reason why even now at Operations Level 41, I'm circling back and about to finish building a Saladin to Tier 9 for the first time. I do not know anyone who has built a Saladin that regretted it. And as a quick side note, I'm not saying to completely neglect your Vidar or not build it. You will max it out eventually with the single chest over the double chest and for a fraction of the grind. And if you're building your Vidar at half the rate, then you should theoretically have a lot more G3 common and rare crystal lying around so that you can push it into that Saladin. Just make sure that you're trying to do every event that rolls around that gives you that G3 common and rare crystal so that you can keep feeding those machines. Speaking of feeding those machines, I should have been doing a lot more OBC hunting and mining of grade 2 materials so that I could build and scrap those grade 2 ships more frequently so that I could fund my grade 3 endeavors a little bit easier. Specifically envoys, since crystal was frequently my bottleneck at that stage of the game, but eventually it moved on to Talas as the ore eventually became a choke point for me. That may have been a result of building the Bortus and then the Augur, however, so perhaps if you're not doing that, it's not as big of a deal for you to focus on ore. Further adding to my resource bottlenecks was probably the fact that I didn't build up my miners intelligently. I didn't focus on a couple specific miners, and instead I kind of half-built several miners, including a Meridian, 2 Horizons, a Cavort, an Antares, a Valkys, probably others that I'm forgetting. In reality, and now that the Amalgam is a thing, the Meridian push to its warp engine lock and 1 maxed Horizon probably would have sufficed for me. I never use my smaller Horizon that I can think of. I never use my Valkys or my Antares, and I rarely use my Cavort for mining outside of just being a big scoop for my raiding. So all those resources and materials I sank into them were effectively just vented out the nearest airlock. Next up, neglecting not only my Franklin, but also even a backup Explorer to go ahead and make sure I was able to do my highest level swarm dailies was a huge mistake of mine, because it kept me from getting those extra frequency modulators from those daily missions. So when I finally got around to building up my Franklin, I was way behind. It took weeks of grinding to get it back to where it should be and on track to be scrapped so that I could build that Franklin A once I hit Operations/Shipyard 35. While I'm lamenting about ships that I didn't build enough again, let's talk about that M score. For the longest time, and even now at Operations level 41, I had one of the weakest Stellas around. Mostly because I didn't like the ship, so I didn't prioritize building it out. And as counterintuitive as it may sound, if you don't like your Stella, build it faster. That M score is the true source of power for the Stella, and the sooner that you embrace it, stay on the bleeding edge of your Stellar research, the more pleasant anything Exchange or Eclipse, or even to a lesser degree all Armadas, is going to be for you. Couple that with some delicious efficiency and even defense platform boosting research, and you got a very solid research tree that you will feel if you start to neglect like I did. Speaking of neglect, Not building up that Shuttle Bay was a huge regret of mine. I'm not sure when I started to let it slip, but it got really bad. How bad? How about being an operations level 41 player with a level 31 Shuttle Bay? No away team launch thrusters or unlock epic assignments research at operations 31 to unlock another away team assignment slot, or epic away teams, and 4% less service award cost efficiency and 5% less weapon damage bonus per level. Sign me up! Speaking of the Shuttle Bay and away team assignments, it took me far too long to figure out how to use the ATA tabs of the Star Trek Fleet Command Officer tool. Now I know what traits and officers I should be building to pursue my goals. Once again, huge shout out to Stewie Doin' Lube for the resource that's freely available to all Star Trek Fleet Command players. Link is down below in the description to their Discord server so that you can get your hands on it. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, or if you feel that your away team assignment strategy could use some TLC, check out the playlist in the card up in the top right now. Well, not now. Maybe finish watching this video first, come back to this timestamp, and then check out that video. Speaking of that officer tool, literally the other half of that tool covers building up your officers and crewing your ships. So one thing I really feel like I should have been doing is testing crews, experimenting, road mapping out which officers I should be building, not just then, but even now for PvP, armadas, hostiles, raiding, you name it. And what would have made that a lot easier is knowing how to read the battle logs, or just checking the battle logs more often if you already know how to read them. So once again, Stewie Doin' Lube swoop in to save the day with their brand new battle log tool. That is the same Discord server that's already down in the description if you want to check that out as well. For those of you using Spox.club, they also have a great tool to help you break down what happened in your battle log so that you can use it to improve. And I wish I had done a lot more of that while I spent time in this range, and even now I should be doing that a lot more often. This next one is pretty much the only drawback to an otherwise fantastic ship, but for me, I'm finding myself regretting building up my auger so much, instead of either the D4 class or the Enterprise. With where I'm standing at this exact moment in the game, I am glad that I built all 3 of the grade 3 epic ships, since they're all decent to knock out dailies or events at double or triple time, but also because my alliance is often at war and it's nice to have some options. However, my main reason for lamenting building up that auger is that it's just too slow. Transit time between hostiles with the impulse speed of a battleship, not to mention trying to run down enemy players, even while I'm cloaked, is just painful. The D4 is awesome and fast, but the Enterprise for myself and many other players was a huge factor in even downloading the game to begin with, and it's a very solid choice as a primary grade 3 epic ship, so I wish that instead of prioritizing that auger, I had instead worked on my Enterprise a little more. Now with all this talk about building this or not building that, something that I was very poor at and am only now getting better at is popping those research and building exocomps when you're going on a spree, especially during the auction SLB type events, but even for big SMS events where you know you're going to be doing a lot of research or building back to back. So don't be like Dan, make sure if you're going to do that you're popping the exocomps to make your life a little easier. On a related note, I'd say that just being impatient in general was a problem for me at that stage of the game. You could argue that it's still a problem for me since during the latest battle pass here in June of 2022, I went from operations level 38 to operations level 41. We probably will do a video on that shortly as well. But unfortunately, I spent a huge stock of resources and materials without any auction SLB style event running or even a big SMS, which is just incredibly unwise. Don't expect to win many SLB auction type events when you're in this stage of the game because it's just so competitive. There's so many players competing in that range. However, a top 10, top 5, top 3 even placement 1 or 2 times can be a tremendous help to keep that forward momentum going for a lot longer after that event ends. So if you're going to be making those big pushes anyways, you might as well get a little bit back from it by doing so during an auction or SLB event. The last thing that I would consider a huge mistake for me at that stage in the game was being way too chained to one alliance. I loved my alliance that I led, the other one that I co-admiraled, and the one that I find myself housed in right now. Every alliance that I've spent multiple battle passes housed in has been a great place to call home. But just like with your actual home, it doesn't hurt to get out every now and again, get some fresh air, see what else is out there, do a little bit of exploring. A good alliance should be more of a home base than a prison. Even your commodores and admiral should be free to go ahead and visit their friends in other alliances or make new ones from time to time, just get a little bit of a break even. Especially when there isn't an alliance leaderboard style event rolling around, or if you're not pushing really hard in territory or involved in some major war situation, it's great to go ahead and take a little bit of a break from that core group of players and go hang out with some other people. Since I stepped down from alliance leadership several months ago, I've kind of considered myself more of a citizen of the server, and I frequently go on walkabouts to hang out with any other alliance that will just host me for a day, 2 days, whatever. There's probably a video to do on that as well, but a big takeaway for the current moment is that pretty much every alliance that you will find yourself involved in is a great place to hang out and make some new friends. So if you find yourself stalling out, not enjoying the game as much, involved in too many wars, or not enough for your playstyle, then I highly recommend dropping those tags at your earliest convenience and seeing what else is out there. Okay, this is probably one of the longest videos that we've done outside of our Let's Play STFC series that we did a while back, but we did have a lot of ground to cover. So what about you? Are you currently in the operations level 31 through 40 range, experiencing some of the hardships and frustrations that we mentioned here? Are you further along, and perhaps could you provide some sort of insight and guidance as well to those players that are currently going through it or about to? As always, drop those comments down below to continue the discussion beyond this video. Remember that likes are free and they help get this video in front of more Star Trek Fleet Command players. Please consider subscribing if you haven't done so already to help us reach that 1701 subscriber milestone. For those of you who are willing and able to financially back the channel, we do have a link to our PayPal donations in the description below as well. And thank you so much to all of those who have already contributed. Mrs. Halfdan is much more patient and understanding when Dan locks himself away in his studio for several hours working on these videos because of those donations, and we very much appreciate it. Check out either of the videos coming up momentarily for more Star Trek Fleet Command and other gaming content. Times are tough right now, so remember the words of Eleanor. Choose to live, my friends. Live long and prosper, and we will see you again soon.